You know that specific chair in the bedroom, the one that was probably bought to sit on, read a book, or maybe just look nice in the corner, but has slowly transformed into a permanent mountain of clothes. Half of them aren't clean enough for the closet, but not dirty enough for the laundry basket. They exist in this weird domestic purgatory. And right next to it is the dining table, where mail goes to die, stacked in neat little piles of delayed decisions. When someone looks at this, society is incredibly quick to hand down a verdict. They call it laziness. They call it a lack of discipline. They say this person just needs to get their act together, buy a planner, and watch a 10-minute motivational video on building habits. But if you are the person staring at that chair, feeling a bizarre mixture of guilt, exhaustion, and complete paralysis, you already know the truth. Laziness is a choice. Laziness feels relaxing. What you are experiencing doesn't feel relaxing at all. It feels like standing at the bottom of a mountain without any climbing gear. You're about to feel incredibly seen right now because researchers and psychologists have been looking into the homes of everyday people, and they've discovered that the inability to clean is rarely about the physical act of wiping a counter or folding a shirt. It is a highly complex psychological response to the modern world. Today, we are breaking down the exact neuroscience and emotional architecture of people who absolutely hate cleaning. And spoiler alert, your messy room might actually be your brain's most desperate survival tactic. Let's start with what is actually happening inside the brain when someone looks at a messy kitchen. For a neurotypical person with high energy, a sink full of dishes is just a sink full of dishes. It's a 10-minute task. Water, soap, sponge, done. But for the person who has been chronically overwhelmed, the brain doesn't see one task. It sees a massive, interconnected web of micro-decisions. Psychologists refer to this as executive dysfunction, and it is a complete breakdown in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, sequencing, and executing actions. When this person looks at the sink, their brain doesn't just say, wash dishes. It says, to wash the dishes, I have to empty the drying rack. But to empty the rack, I have to open the cabinets. But the cabinets are unorganized, so I won't know where to put the bowls. And I need to wipe the counter, but the spray is empty. So I need to go to the laundry room to get the refill. Suddenly, washing a plate isn't a chore. It's a 20-step, logistical nightmare that requires the cognitive load of organizing a corporate merger. Their brain runs out of processing power before they even touch the faucet. This isn't an excuse, it's a neurological reality. The mental battery required to sequence these steps is completely depleted. So, they turn around, walk out of the kitchen, and sit on the couch. Not because they don't care, but because their executive function has pulled the fire alarm and shut down the building. They are experiencing task paralysis. They want the kitchen clean desperately. They just literally cannot build the mental bridge to get from here to there. But there is a much deeper, more profound layer to this, especially when we look at the dynamics of the American household. Let's talk about the silent strike. There is a massive demographic of people, often the ones who have spent decades being the designated caretakers, the parents, the reliable spouses, who suddenly stop cleaning. Their houses, once pristine, start to gather clutter. Society looks at them and assumes they are letting themselves go. But sociology tells a completely different story. Have you ever heard of invisible labor? It's the mental load of managing everyone else's existence. Knowing exactly when the kids need new shoes, remembering that there's only one roll of paper towels left, picking up the wet towel someone else dropped on the bathroom floor for the 1,000th time. For years, they picked up the towel, they washed the dish, they carried the invisible weight of the entire family's domestic life. And then, one Tuesday, they look at a coffee cup left on the coffee table by an ungrateful family member, and something inside them snaps. It's not a loud snap, it's a quiet, foundational shift. They don't pick up the cup. They are experiencing severe empathy burnout. The messy house is no longer a sign of neglect. It is an active, silent protest against being treated like the household manager while feeling entirely invisible. The mess is the only voice they have left to say, I am exhausted from carrying the weight of this family. And I refuse to clean up a world for people who do not respect the effort it takes to maintain it. They aren't hating the act of cleaning. They are hating the lack of reciprocity. The clutter becomes a monument to their burnout. And speaking of monuments, we have to talk about one of the most brilliant, unconscious defense mechanisms the human psyche has ever invented. Have you ever noticed that when a house is in complete disarray, nobody can come over? You can't host a dinner party. You can't have your neighbors drop by for coffee. You can't even let the delivery driver look past the front door. For people who have been deeply hurt, socially exhausted, or traumatized by the expectations of others, a messy house is not a failure. It is armor. It is a brilliant, impenetrable fortress made of Amazon boxes, unfolded laundry, and scattered magazines. When your house is a mess, you have the ultimate, unquestionable excuse to keep the world at arm's length. Sorry, the house is a disaster. We can't host. It is the perfect shield. Out in the world, these people might be highly functioning. They smile at work, they navigate the grocery store, they play the social game. But that performance requires so much energy that when they get home, they need an environment that absolutely guarantees nobody will breach their sanctuary. The clutter is literally protecting their peace. They are building a physical wall to enforce a psychological boundary they don't have the words to set. If the house was clean, people might get close. And if people get close, they might demand energy, or worse, they might cause pain. So, the subconscious mind says, let's leave those boxes in the hallway. Let's keep the dining table covered in junk. As long as this mess exists, we are safe from intruders. It is social architecture, disguised as bad housekeeping. There is also a fascinating phenomenon happening in our modern work culture that directly impacts how our living rooms look. Think about what the average person does for a living today. We are living in an era of extreme emotional and cognitive labor. Whether they are a nurse dealing with patient trauma, a teacher managing 30 different personalities, a customer service rep absorbing people's anger all day, or a corporate worker navigating endless Zoom meetings and office politics. They spend 8 to 10 hours a day managing chaos, regulating other people's emotions, and bringing order to abstract problems. They are professional problem solvers, but human willpower and decision-making capacity are finite resources. A famous concept in psychology known as decision fatigue proves that the more choices you make throughout the day, the harder it becomes for your brain to make even simple decisions later on. By the time they pull into their driveway at 6 p.m., their decision-making tank isn't just empty, it's in the negative. They walk through the front door, and their house demands more decisions. Where does this mail go? Should I freeze this meat or cook it? Which load of laundry goes first? The brain physically rejects the demand. They have spent all their order-making energy out in the world, leaving absolutely zero for their own personal space. The irony is tragic. They are so good at holding everyone else's world together that their own living environment slowly falls apart. Their messy bedroom isn't a reflection of their character. It's the receipt for how much of themselves they gave to the economy that day. Now, let's talk about the trap of perfectionism. When most people think of perfectionists, they picture immaculate homes, color-coded closets, and alphabetical spice racks. But actual clinical psychology paints a very different picture. Some of the messiest people on earth are paralyzed perfectionists. Their homes are chaotic precisely because they have impossibly high standards. Here is how their brain operates. If I am going to clean the bathroom, I can't just wipe the mirror. I have to scrub the grout with a toothbrush, wash the shower curtain, reorganize the medicine cabinet, and reseal the tub. Since I don't have 3 uninterrupted hours and the energy of an Olympic athlete right now, I simply won't start. It is a toxic, all-or-nothing, cognitive distortion. They are terrified of doing a mediocre job. The idea of just doing the bare minimum, just wiping the counter and leaving the rest for tomorrow, feels fundamentally wrong to their nervous system. So, they wait. They wait for the perfect weekend, the perfect burst of motivation, the perfect alignment of the stars where they will miraculously have the energy to deep clean the entire house in one epic montage. But that day never comes, because life is messy, and energy is limited, so the mess grows and the guilt compounds. They don't hate cleaning. They hate the immense, crushing pressure they put on themselves the moment they pick up a sponge. Their clutter is actually a byproduct of their own extreme standards. We also need to address a profound truth that rarely gets discussed in psychological deep dives, and it's something that millions of older adults are quietly screaming into the void. Sometimes, a messy house has absolutely nothing to do with childhood trauma, subconscious rebellion, or perfectionism. Sometimes, the psychology is simply the grief of physical limitation. As people age, cross into their 50s, 60s, and 70s, or battle chronic illnesses like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, the body changes the rules of the game. Society, heavily influenced by an endless stream of pristine lifestyle influencers and relentless hustle culture, pushes this narrative that a clean house equals moral superiority. It demands that an aging body perform with the stamina of a 25-year-old, but biology doesn't care about societal expectations. When someone has spent 40 years scrubbing floors, raising families, and fighting gravity, their bones and muscles have paid the toll. The psychology here isn't a dark shadow self avoiding the truth. The psychology is radical acceptance. They are looking at the dust on the baseboards and making a highly rational, self-preserving choice. They are saying, I only have a certain amount of energy today. Am I going to spend it dusting a shelf that will just get dusty again tomorrow? Or am I going to spend it reading a book, calling my grandchild, or simply resting? Choosing not to clean when your body is in pain is not a failure. It is an act of profound self-compassion. It is the realization that life is entirely too short to spend the final chapters of it at war with dust. Let's look at the actual objects themselves. Why is it so hard to just throw things away? You watch these home makeover shows, and they make it look so easy. Just toss it in a black garbage bag. But for the person living in the clutter, it's never just a broken toaster or a stack of magazines from 2018. Objects hold psychic weight. They are anchors to past identities. That box of unused craft supplies isn't garbage. It represents the creative, vibrant version of themselves they still hope to become one day. Getting rid of it feels like admitting defeat. That sweater they haven't worn in 5 years. It reminds them of a time when life felt lighter, when they fit into a different shape, or when they were with a specific person. To throw it away feels like betraying a memory. Psychologists refer to this as the endowment effect, where we place an irrationally high value on things simply because we own them. But for people who struggle with letting go, it's deeper. The clutter is an emotional museum. They are surrounded by physical representations of their past successes, their future aspirations, and their unhealed attachments. When someone tells them to just clean it up, they are asking them to process an overwhelming amount of grief, nostalgia, and lost potential all at once. It's not a cleaning task. It's an existential crisis masquerading as a closet reorganization. They keep the mess because holding on to the past, even a messy past, feels safer than facing the empty space of an unwritten future. So what happens when the science of all this finally clicks? What happens when a person realizes they aren't lazy, they aren't broken, and their messy home is actually a complex tapestry of empathy, burnout, decision fatigue, and emotional armor? A massive paradigm shift occurs. The shame begins to evaporate, and the Center on Everyday Lives of Families at UCLA actually conducted a massive study on this. They found that the physical clutter in a home directly spikes cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone, especially in women. The messy house is a visual representation of a to-do list that never ends, keeping the nervous system in a constant state of low-grade fight or flight. The brain is scanning the room, seeing unfinished tasks and registering them as threats to survival. But once a person understands why they avoid the tasks, they stop fighting themselves. They stop waiting for motivation. They realize that motivation is a myth and action actually precedes feeling. This is where the magic of neuroplasticity comes in. They don't try to clean the whole house. They don't aim for perfection. They set a timer for 15 minutes. That's it. 15 minutes of playing a song they love and just moving things back to where they belong. The brain, which was terrified of a 3-hour marathon, can agree to 15 minutes. And in those 15 minutes, as they wipe a single counter or clear a single chair, the brain receives a tiny, beautiful hit of dopamine. The reward circuit lights up. They prove to themselves that they could affect their environment. They take the power back from the objects. The meaningful truth behind all of this is that your home was never meant to be a museum. It was never meant to look like a perfectly curated real estate listing where human beings aren't allowed to leave a fingerprint. A home is a machine for living. It is a shelter for your mind and body. The goal of cleaning isn't to impress a hypothetical guest who might drop by, and it certainly isn't to prove your moral worth to a society obsessed with aesthetics. The goal is to clear enough physical space so that your mind has room to breathe. When you finally decide to pick up the clothes off that chair, you aren't just putting away laundry. You are gently dismantling the armor you no longer need. You are acknowledging that while the world out there demands so much of your energy, you still deserve a quiet, functional space to retreat to. You are extending grace to the tired version of yourself. You clean not because you hate the mess, but because you respect yourself enough to create a sanctuary. And some days, the mess will win. Some days, the clothes will pile back up on the chair, and the dishes will sit in the sink overnight. And that is perfectly fine, because you now know the secret. The mess isn't a reflection of your failure. It's just proof that you are living a full, exhausting, beautiful, and complex human life. The next time you look at a messy room, don't judge it. Listen to what it's telling you about what you need. Are you exhausted? Are you hiding? Or are you just busy living? Figure that out, and the cleaning will take care of itself. If this completely changed how you view your own habits, you need to watch the next video on screen right now. We are decoding another misunderstood behavior that society gets completely wrong. Hit subscribe, and let's keep exploring the hidden mechanics of the mind.